So he's got the people he wants in the right positions. And he's very good, as you said, Rosie, at vibes, at what I call signaling actions. So this week, he's been out and about showing exactly what his priorities are: cost of living, devolution, the politics of place, and so on. What he's got to now do is articulate a politics, but also develop a politics.
Now, will Andy Burnham live to regret making enemies of the Starmerites? Let's speak now to the Sunday Times columnist Jason Cowley, who writes in today's paper that while Ruthless Burnham is relaxed about his purge of Starmer Loyalists, it could be a problem for him in the autumn when he tries to get his agenda through. Jason joins us now. Jason, good morning.
Good morning.
It does feel like a long time ago now, but let's go back to Monday when we had that very lengthy process of Andy Burnham appointing his cabinet. How strategic was it in terms of how many people he kept alongside him who would have stood shoulder to shoulder with Keir Starmer?
Yes, it was a dramatic moment, I thought, and politics at its most raw and unforgiving, kind of the mass cull of Starmer loyalists, not only in the cabinet, but right down deep into the ranks of the ministers. So how strategic was it? Completely strategic. I think Burnham has revealed himself to be at once more political than Starmer and more ruthless than Starmer. And that was certainly the view of those who were dismissed by him last week.
And what are the consequences of that? I guess the first hint, well, not a hint, it was fairly overt and obvious, was the next morning in the form of Darren Jones making very clear that he thought the first policy announcement that had come out didn't all add up.
Yes, Darren had they'd been to a party, hadn't he? They all gathered in a pub in North London for a sort of farewell drinks, drowning their sorrows. Keir Starmer's leaving party, but many of those sacked cabinet ministers turned up, and junior ministers and their advisors and spads. And Darren Jones must have woken up feeling pretty irritated about the scrapping of the ID scheme on which he'd been working. I think the Burnhamites had said they were going to use the money saved from that scheme to fund the saving on removal of VAT on household electricity bills. And Darren Jones pointedly put across on social media that policy was unfunded. So he was immediately challenging the man who had just sacked him. I thought it was a unwise moment, but a rather amusing moment to observe as a journalist from afar.
Yeah. How problematic do you think some of those previous Starmer loyalists are going to be to Andy Burnham? So we're talking about the likes of Rachel Reeves, for example.
Rachel is a Labour loyalist. She was obviously quite unhappy to be offered Education Secretary, which was a significant demotion from Chancellor, and she chose to go onto the back benches. Others were removed altogether. Will they form an organised faction? It's unlikely. Darren Jones hinted that he might. When Louise Hay resigned from the cabinet at the end of 2024, she's now Andy Burnham's chief power broker, the de facto deputy prime minister. She became head of a group called the Tribune Group of soft left MPs. Jones has hinted that he wants to form his own faction, but he's not especially popular inside the parliamentary party. So I can't see that a group of MPs will mobilise around him. But when I was speaking to some of these people who were sacked last week, what they were saying is they have a residual loyalty to Keir Starmer, but also to their own records in government. And they don't need to toady up to the new regime. So I think they will make key interventions when they feel they need to make them, defending their own record in government.
OK, so similar maybe to what we saw on Tuesday morning then.
Yes.
Andy Burnham, there's so many times we've talked about sort of the vibes-based, the sort of aura that he's created and the fun and the social media videos. But actually, the point you make in your column, Jason, is that he's proved that he can be, when necessary, to be pretty ruthless.
Yeah, it's completely ruthless. I mean, otherwise he wouldn't have taken over the Labour Party in the way that he did. I mean, it's Machiavellian, I think, in its planning and execution. He's got a bigger problem though, because what he's promising or what he's offering, he said, is a complete transformation of British politics, what he calls a new political and economic consensus, comparable to what Margaret Thatcher achieved after 1979 and the great Labour leader Clement Attlee achieved after 1945. In other words, you create a new political consensus and other parties have to follow it. So he's promising that, but as I say in my column today, he hasn't got the kind of infrastructure, the outriders, the ideological ecosystem to support him. So in a way, he's building the house as he's trying to live in it simultaneously. And we can see that with the creation of Number 10 North in Manchester. So Burnham has huge ambitions. He's an extraordinarily adept politician. But very soon he's going to collide with the reality of Labour's fiscal inheritance, I think.
So what does he have to do if you were, let's say, one of his advisors right now, Jason? What has he got to do to shore up his position before it gets to the autumn to give himself the best chance to do that?
Well, to shore up his position, you need to gather around you people you trust and with whom you're politically aligned. He's done that. He's appointed the chief of staff he wants in James Purnell. So he's got the people he wants in the right positions. And he's very good, as you said, Rosie, at vibes, at what I call signalling actions. So this week, he's been out and about showing exactly what his priorities are: cost of living, devolution, the politics of place, and so on. What he's got to now do is articulate a politics, but also develop a politics. Don't forget, he's constrained by the Labour manifesto of 2024. He's constrained by Rachel Reeves's fiscal rules. He's constrained by the party's pledges on not to raise the key taxes. So, what room has he got to manoeuvre? I don't think very much. So I would imagine he and his team are already thinking, how can we create the conditions, not yet, but how can we create the conditions soon for an early general election? Then we can have our own manifesto and our own mandate.
Interestingly, in the interview, the first sort of lengthy interview that Andy Burnham has done with the BBC, Laura Koonsberg, he told her no early election.
No, I don't think any time soon, because Labour are behind in the polls. But would he want to go as long as 2029, which is when the next election has to be held? So he will be simultaneously working within the logic of the situation as he inherited it and as he finds himself, while also strategically planning for what comes next. In other words, what will a Burnham government be and do, and what can it do potentially in the future? That's what he's thinking about. He has these big plans. How does he create the conditions to execute them?
Jason, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Jason Cowley, Sunday Times columnist, and you can read his piece today. Starmer Purge reveals the knife beneath the T-shirt of Andy Burnham's actions. Week 1 as Prime Minister.